This is Thursday afternoon, so that means it's time for Genealogy Chat. We are coming to you live from a different room in the Will and R Genealogy Center, which is a service of the Eckhart Public Library. Today we're actually in the research room where we have all of our books, our yearbooks, and artifacts, and we have a wonderful display of high school yearbooks from 1915 and such. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. It's a very, very full show. So today's Auburn Minute is the Eckhart Public Library. And there's a picture of it right here on our computer screen. And a few fun facts. It opened in 1911. The architectural style is the Chicago Prairie style. We have stained glass all on lots of windows, perhaps all of them. The ones all over the place are wonderful. You really need to come to the library. And the ones here on the top were designed by Gustav Brand or Brand. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation of his last name, but some of his paintings were exhibited at the World's Fair exhibition in Chicago. We have lots of bricks and the tiled roof, and this is the old front entrance, and now we enter through the back of the library. The cornerstone was laid in 1910 by the governor at that time, Governor Marshall. And a few years later, he became the vice president of the country under President Woodrow Wilson. Let's see, we also have a library park in the back with a fountain. So I'm going to scroll through a few. Oh, here's another view of the front of the library. And then here's a picture of our beautiful fountain that I believe is from 1912 or 1913. And this is an old picture of the back of the library. And this is a picture of our teen library and so forth. But this is our Auburn Minute, where we talked about the Eckhart Public Library that we all know and love. So the next session is about photographs, old-time photographs and so forth. And I brought some photographs that were in my mother's side of the family. And let's see. And of course, my mother told me everything about them, who everybody was, and of course I didn't remember it. So I want everybody to use a photo collections worksheet, and I'll go over that a little bit later. But this is a picture of an ancestor. I don't know his name, but he fought for it with the Union. And this is called a negative. Let's see. This is a negative, which means it's reversed like a mirror glass. And as you can see, the acronym US is backwards. But these were often taken. Well, this fella looks like he's a young boy. But these were often taken by the soldiers because they didn't know if they would make it home or not. There was such a high casualty rate that many of them died. And so these were relatively cheap. And they had pictures of themselves taken to send to their families. And at that time, and these are all from my family's collection, at that time they had cases. And with this one, cases to protect the photo. And, sorry, I got distracted. They had cases to protect the photos, and with this case, it's a picture of the American flag, and that's the back. And then on the inside of the case is a velvet protective case. And this was common. You had the photograph in the center, and then you had the case. One side was just kind of plain, and then the other side had this velvet case. And I'm going to show you a few additional photos. This is another example of a case. They had all sorts of types of designs on your cases. They had a type of cross on this case, and then I want to show you, I believe it's just one more of the oh yes, there's one here with ancestors who were wearing hats. Of course, it has, fortunately, this one is intact. It has the case as well as the velvet on the inside, and the outside was the cross that we saw. And these two fellas here, there's one fella with a top hat and another fellow with a lower hat. And from what I understand, just before 1868, the top hats were only used by the wealthy, and then the lower class, middle class people used this hat. And so now I want to move to another type of photo, and something that we have a lot of here in the Will and R Genealogy Center. This thing is known as a stereoscope, and then this was the photograph that they had in the late Victorian age. This was a photograph. I've digitized some of these, but you.
Shall I come in?
Oh, yes.
I can
yes.
demonstrate
I
proper
have an
use.
expert with photographs who is going to demonstrate how these work. But first of all, if it's okay, this is Andrew Laverghetta. He's our excellent videographer, photographer, and so forth. And I thank you so much for being here. But these are examples of stereographs that I have here on the computer. This is one that was taken from the Indiana Light Battery. They're awaiting embarkation. And that's actually the one that Andrew is holding up. But on my camera, I've got an example. You put the image, this one on the right side. Are we able to do this right to now? Yep. Oh, wonderful. Well, you put the image, you've got one image that's on the right side, and then one image that's on the left side, and they're just a little bit different. And so if you put this inside the little holder, this is called the Stereograph, right here, and if you put this inside the stereoscope, the two images are melded into one. Oh, yes, look at that. That's exactly the way it looks. Thank you, Andrew. And they're melded into one, and you have a 3D photograph.
Oh, it doesn't help you. Oh, wait. It has
Isn't
a
that
thing
neat?
here.
And then you can move it in and out, and you do have a photograph. And if you're old enough and can remember the old Viewmasters, it's in 3D. So the two pictures meld, and you can see the soldiers sitting on top of the bales of hay and cotton and so forth.
It's so much more interesting looking at it through this.
It is, but at least you get an idea of the technology when you look at the zoom in of when you look at the zoomed in feature of the two photos. So when you have these wonderful things, stereographs and photographs, I mean, what do you do with them? I mean, what's the whole process behind them? And to explain this to us is Andrew Laverghetta. So take it away and lay it on us,
Lay it on
please.
Well, this was actually on display a little bit at the Garrett Museum of Art somewhat recently. It's a camera of mine that I was gifted. I haven't particularly used this one myself, but basically it's working with the whole idea of what a camera is. It's just a dark box that holds a lens and some way to record what's on the lens. So usually you got a couple of clasps here and up here, and those will hold a piece of wood that will hold something similar to this. With, for example, the tin types, you mentioned that. What you do, now this is much newer, even though it's still not very new, is you'd have this piece here. You would have some kind of, it's not specifically tin, it's any other kind of metal, and it's coated, it's usually darker, and it's coated with a light sensitive material. And then, like, let's say you've got the back of this open, then you would take your sensitive material, you would pop it down in there. You don't want to open this up when you're in the light, because then that would expose your sensitive material. And then you would put that into the back of the camera, and you'd slide that in there. And then, while that was in there, you would take the front part here, you would pull that out, and that would expose the sensitive material to the inside of the camera. And then you'd click the shutter, or you'd take, I think what they would do a lot of times, they'd have like a bowler derby hat, and they'd pop it over the lens. And then when it was time to take the picture, they would take the hat off of the lens, count to a number, however long, depending upon how bright it was. They'd put the hat back on top, and then they would make sure that their stuff was sealed up here. So then they would take it into a tent someplace. They would open this up in the tent, probably open up the back of it, let's say. They would pop it out onto their hand, and then they would have, theoretically they should be using gloves, because you're dealing with silver nitrate, which stains a lot. And it's bad for you. And then you'd have a developer liquid you'd pour on there. So like you pour developer liquid on this, you'd make sure it went to every place, and then you'd pour some water on it. And then it's interesting because you see the picture starting to form, and most of the time it looks kind of like a negative. And what you said, it is a negative because the area that is hit with light turns, like has something that hardens onto it. But since you have a dark piece of metal, that dark piece of metal shows up those areas as dark. Whereas usually if you print a photograph, it looks light because it's a negative of a negative, I suppose. So that means what you're seeing right there, anything that looks kind of brighter or white is where something was exposed, and anything that looks darker, like his darker jacket there, that's going to be something that wasn't exposed. So that would be just clear, I'm going to say glass. You could also make these on glass as an ambrotype. And sometimes people will still do that nowadays if they're using an antique photos kind of camera, and they will make their image on glass. You can hold up the glass and then look at it, and it's a negative. But then you turn it over and you spray paint the back of it, and then it becomes an ambrotype. So it turns a negative into a positive. And it's a somewhat dangerous. It can be very dangerous to do this nowadays because you're using things like ether sometimes, and you're using silver nitrate. There are different ways that you can get around using ether, but silver nitrate is still the main method. One of the important things that I remember from daguerreotypes and learning about them in school is that it was discovered by like accidental mercury vapor getting on something that had been kind of photographed. And so it's definitely dangerous. And there are better ways now to make daguerreotypes, but it's still not without its dangers. Named after Louis Daguerre, I think? Yeah. So, yeah.
That's right, yes.
That's the inside of the camera. There are bellows that are here, and the way that you would kind of focus is to move the lens further away from the back standard there. And this is a shutter that you see there. The little hose that's there is like where you would plug in your bulb shutter, your squeeze shutter. Squeeze that, and then it would trip the shutter that was on the camera there. So this was probably made prior to 1930. So it probably wouldn't have a lot of work with those kind of wet plate styles of photography. But I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that the U.S. that was on the person's uniform is backwards, because indeed it goes through the lens and it has to flip it and invert it. And then finally, when you get to develop it, then you can see what you're working with.
That's fascinating.
It's cool. And then, so if you make one of those, then you have one of those at that time. If somebody says, oh, can I have one of those? Then you have to sit there for another picture, have somebody else put another piece of prepared metal in the back of the camera, take your shot, and then do it all over again. Go through the whole process. So it isn't easy to make those tintypes multiple times to make copies of them, unless you're scanning them like you do now.
So how long does it take for the whole process to make the tintype, or to take the picture and make the tintype, and is it something that's done on site?
Yeah, you have to do this all on site. You can't get the stuff prepared, go out to where you're going, take your photographs, and then leave, and then develop them at home. You have to do. That's why you would see like Civil War with the big wooden cart that's pulled behind them, and that kind of thing, because they would have to be in a dark area and they have to do it right away. It's not going to last for very long once you get your plate ready. So the plate that would be photographed on, you would need to have that clean, relatively clean, on location, which is going to be difficult. You pour a kind of a collodion kind of mixture that sets up on the plate. It kind of gets kind of jelly, and then you have to pour off the extra, dunk it into a silver nitrate bath, and then get it into your plate holder, which again was like this kind of thing, but older. And then, so that's going to take some time to do that, because you would hold it, you would have your collodion, you would pour it onto there, work it around just right, and then dump it off into the bottle again, or wherever you put it. And then you have to put it into the bath of silver for like a minute, 2 minutes, something like that. Take it out. You have to put that in the back of your holder. You would have to know the right kind of exposure. So how long do you take the hat off the camera for to make your picture? Put it back in, and then take this part. I'm just using this as a proxy for the actual piece, because that piece, that small little piece that you were showing, you would have to take that out. You would have to do that all in the darkness of like a little tent. Sometimes nowadays they can put like special red filters on windows, and then you can do this in red filtered light, but then you would have your developer liquid, pour it on there, dump it off, and then splash it with water. And then you'd have pretty much your picture, but then you have to throw it into Fixer, and that gets off the extra stuff. It gets rid of the stuff that wasn't exposed. So that's where the darkness of the jacket, that's where that comes off, is in the Fixer. So it washes away, and it's just like magic. So if you want to see this, I haven't done this, I don't have videos for this, but you can search, like go to YouTube and search like making a tintype. I wouldn't do it right now because of people's videos, but yeah.
Right.
But yeah, if you at home want to see how to do this, or see how it looks, it's magical.
Yes.
Google or search on YouTube how to making a tintype. It's pretty cool.
It is. So does that explain why they were so expensive?
How were they expensive? See, I just know it as something now that people had done. I'm sure it can be very expensive, because you do have to have that person's time to do that, and if a lot of people want to be photographed, then that takes a lot of time to do that. Probably 15 to 30 minutes per per photograph. Maybe if they're really quick, I don't know, because I mean you do have to put it into the silver for a length of time. There is a salt that is in the collodion that chemically reacts with the silver nitrate, and then that turns into a special kind of silver that is light sensitive, UV light sensitive, because sometimes you'll see a picture of somebody that has like freckles or not a lot of freckles, and it shows up really dark on these kind of photographs. Things like that. If somebody has had like a lot of sun damage to their skin, they will often show up a little bit darker than somebody who doesn't. So, but yeah, the time investment to take each one of these photographs, and then they would often have like a pole that goes up behind them and braces their neck in place, that braces their head in place, because this is one of those photographs where you can't move. You have to. It's like sitting behind you, and then you lean up against it. So you stay there for maybe 10 seconds or so. So if you want to maintain the same smile for 10 seconds, you can go ahead. Or you can just look like yourself.
So obviously you couldn't hold this and take pictures. So what device is attached to this that holds it in place?
There's a tripod thing right there. And there'd be different ways. There'd be proprietary setups and such like that. But you would this is fairly new. Just screw this into your tripod, and then it would sit up there. You can use a lot of different kind of tripods for it, just as long as you can get a screw in on that. So I actually used a Bosch surveyor or contractor's tripod for a while to hold something very similar to this, but I just had to screw in a bolt to hold it still. So yeah, it's definitely got to be held still, so you're not going to be taking the picture like this. Though there are press cameras that are similar, but those use modern film, and can take pictures just like normal. Normal, same exposures as normal.
So you can buy all of the materials and the chemicals that you need.
Yeah, there are different places across the United States that will sell like certain like silver nitrate crystals. I've done that. There's a place in New York, I think, where I got some of them. But using distilled water and using a scale that measures grams, measuring out a certain amount of grams so that you have the proper percentage of your silver nitrate to make a good solution, to make the proper solution. And I actually use that to make silver salt prints.
Yes, I've heard about that. Yes.
That's like during the time of I think Abraham Lincoln would have been photographed and printed on salt prints. So what they would do is, instead of using a plate, or instead of using a one of these kind of photos, the plate on it, they would use glass. Like, instead of using the metal that was kind of painted black, they would use a piece of glass, and then that's how they would make the photographs. They would turn it on, put it on prepared paper that's prepared the same way, throw it out in the sun, bring it back, and then they'd have a positive photograph. So. And this is a Corona View camera. This one was made in Rochester, it says on it, by the Gundlach Manhattan Optical Company. Yeah. I haven't taken this apart. Maybe I shouldn't do that right now. That's all right. That's how you would change your lenses, or you can screw them off there. So.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
What else do you have for
What
us?
else? I don't know if I have anything else. What else do I have? Do I have anything else? I don't think I have anything else.
Okay.
No.
Well, thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for coming on the show, Andrew.
I will allow you to wrap things up. And
This
with
has been wonderful. I learned so much, and how the two are incorporated with the camera
Yeah.
and the photographs.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome. I'll see myself out.
Okay. So I want to go back. Let's say you're not like. Let's say you're like my. Let's say you know who the people are in the photographs. So let's go back to just a little bit to the computer. So let's say you know who the two fellas are in the photographs. Right. And then let's go back to the worksheet. Okay. So I created something that's called a photo collection worksheet. And yeah, that gives you the idea. Yeah. And you write, if you can, the date, a description of what it is, the two fellas sitting in a chair, the number of items, 1, and vital information, such as who they are, Uncle Joe and Uncle Bob, and the place where this was taken, Fort Wayne, Indiana, what color, whether it's a tin type or Ambrose type or daguerreotype, and it really helps if you can fill all this out, because if you're like me, I didn't really pay attention to my mother when she told me who everybody was, and I've forgotten. Okay, so let's go to the last segment of the show, which is photo of the week. Can you identify this photo? So here it is. We would love for you to tell us what type of car it is, what the maker, the model, the year, and so forth. Let us know in the comments section of Facebook, and you'll make us extremely happy. We have a copy that's very similar to this in the main library. They're very front of it, to the right of the old main front door entrance. So if you can tell us the year, the make and model, whether it was a coupe or a sedan, and so forth, we would greatly appreciate it. So that's the show. I want to thank my guest, Andrew Laverghetta, who showed us his wonderful, wonderful camera and all that expert knowledge. And I want to thank you for watching the show, and I want to thank Zach Hymack, the wonderful man behind the camera, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.